Qhubeka ntona phasi into nezinto kwagcwala bonke obubhanqa ngithi into bakhola phembokweni bezodicela isichitho bobongena ngendle bavala ingqondo njengesiciko nonke isithixo khona uthixo ndisiphiwe isithixo sendikho sokhutha umlilo kubasweziko qhume njengesiko ngudolo lomoya ubona iculo lomculo buciko kangathi uxhonywe ecankwelanga sezawutshanya amaphiko ya balesithandwa ndimbizo biko dume ngocisha umboko ayomfihlo buzuyihlo wazingendlabeni sesemihla ngemihle sihlo hlasela umboka nthandabuza kholo yiko jula mathambe ngqondo.
Welcome back to the Hip Hop African Podcast. We are doing a special series of episodes that are being recorded live with African Studies students from Howard University and George Washington University. We are teaming up for this series with Words, Beats, and Life, which is also live streaming the episodes on Wednesday evenings on their Facebook page at facebook.com/wordsbeatslife. You can find the full schedule on our site, hiphopafrican.com.
So good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us for this episode of the Hip Hop African Podcast. As Dr. Clark mentioned, I'm Anastasia Clouting, the managing editor of Words, Beats, and Life's journals, the global peer-reviewed journal of hip hop culture. I'm also a writer and a poet, so I'm really excited to get into this conversation today. And I'm delighted to join Dr. Clark, who is the professor of African Studies at Howard University. She teaches the Hip Hop in Africa course and is also the author of a 2018 book on the subject. And she's started this series as a collaboration between Words, Beats, and Life and Howard, and is joined today by our special guest, Kanyi Mavi. Now, Kanyi Mavi is a Cape Town-based lyricist who's well respected for her creative use of Xhosa, her native language, which she raps in exclusively, and really creates powerful hip hop lyrics in Xhosa. And her music also touches on important social issues like sexual harassment, domestic violence, and drug abuse. She released her debut album in 2012. And last year in 2020, she released both an EP and a full album. And we're really thrilled to be talking to Kanyi Mavi today because she's widely acknowledged as a groundbreaking artist in the global hub of creative hip hop innovation in Cape Town. We're also joined today by Dr. Clark's students from Howard and George Washington universities and with the Words, Beats, and Life community and the general public on the Words, Beats, and Life Facebook page. After this conversation, we will be taking questions from the audience. So please get your questions in early via Facebook or Zoom so we can get to as many of them as possible. Thank you everyone for being with us today. Over to you, Dr. Clark.
Thank you. Thank you. That was, so I actually, just a funny story, when we were talking, trying to go through the pronunciation of the albums and the EPs, we had a phone call, and I feel like I have to tell the story that, so I was helping her with the pronunciations, and I realized I'm pronouncing it as if this was Swahili. And I'm like, I really don't know where the emphasis goes. So I'm like, and I realized that, you know, I've gotten in trouble with other African languages pronouncing them the way it would be pronounced in Swahili. And it's like, no, that's not right. So I'm like, well, don't take my advice for it because I don't know.
Your inflection's better than mine.
Yeah, but I was like, there were a couple of things I was like, I really don't know. But
that's easier. How are you pronouncing it?
So okay. So the first album, Iintombi-Zifikile.
Yes.
That's right. Okay. And then Khon'ba, the EP.
Khon'ba.
Okay. And then the album Igubu Lam.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. All right. And it was interesting because sometimes I'm listening to you and I obviously don't understand what you're saying, but there are times that I'm like, oh, okay, that sounds like familiar, that whole kind of, you know, that southeast region of the continent. Because, you know, there were folks from Southern Africa that kind of came up to Tanzania with their languages. I know the Zulu came raiding my people. My people live on top of a mountain now because they ran from the Zulu, like literally my father's village is on a mountain because they ran from the Zulu. But that's history. A long time ago. But listening to so one of the things I wanted to do, because when I first started listening to the most recent album, I felt like there was a lot more blending of different musical elements than the first one. And so I said, let me do some reading on Xhosa music to see, and so when I was reading, it was saying that one, music is a big part of the culture, but that there are lots of also influences in other South African genres, like like Cape Town jazz or South African jazz. But then it was also saying that there is this style of singing among the women do. And there's a way, a tone or something in which the singing. So I didn't know I don't know enough about the music, obviously, to say for sure, but I wanted to, I guess the first question is to find out how much of was that part of was I imagining things? I mean, did you kind of fuse in some of that in the new album?
Yes, of course. I mean, it's very hard to separate myself from the things of my culture because, you kind of live your culture. So anything creative that you do will also draw from, your culture. It doesn't matter what kind of culture it is. It's partly street culture, it's partly the tribal culture, it's partly, the urban culture, it's the hip hop culture. The cultures that you involve yourself in will always come out in your creativity. It doesn't matter what kind of creativity you immerse yourself in, what kind of arts you immerse yourself in. But yes, of course, it definitely came out in the music, sure.
Okay.
Wait. You know what? I have a gripe. First of all, I'd like to just let's just do with my gripe. You guys, Xhosa, no. Xhosa.
Like,
can we try?
Also,
there we go.
Okay. Yeah, Xhosa, like Xhosa.
Like with the horse.
Okay, so Xhosa.
Okay, so even I had been like doing in the front, like.
So it's like Xhosa.
Yeah, like Xhosa.
Xhosa.
First of all, let me say, I don't think it's fair because listening to your music, like I'm like it's just one of one of the things I think you're known for is not just speaking the language, but in such a way that it sounds like it's so beautiful. It's like, so you're trying to explain, I'm like trying to learn from someone who's like mastered it in such a way that, because I know I've played your music for South Africans and their response has always been, wow, like her use of the language is like, it shows like a higher level of understanding of it than a lot of kids who grew up in like the urban areas, they speak it, but it's not like this kind of mastery of it. So
I think, I grew up in the township, right? And it was a township filled with a lot of Xhosa speaking people. So at that time, it was not too far from, let's say, the Eastern Cape, because my grand was directly from the Eastern Cape, my mom was directly from the Eastern Cape, and I was the first generation of my family to be born in a township. So I can, the Xhosa that they speak at home is in the Xhosa that I can rap, but I can also fuse it with, the street kind of slang of the land, but to be honest, I haven't really studied Xhosa. I didn't go to school to study it. There are people that I would deem more well-versed in Xhosa than I am. But I think the beauty in the language is its depth, in that, there are still new ways to be explored on how to use the language, how to use the words. But the language itself is super deep. There's there's a long way for me to even go, because as I rap, I also learn more about the language, you know, because I went to a lot of English schools, predominantly English schools. So it's a language that I learned just by speaking. It's literally my mother tongue, you know, in that sense.
So then, okay, so one of the songs I'm gonna ask you about, because the songs, one of the songs I thought was so beautiful in terms of the singing and the vocalizing, Msindo, I'm saying it right?
Yeah.
So could you talk a little bit about that song? And because I saw you perform it on TV, I believe you performed it on TV once, and then it's on the album. And watching you perform it on TV, it just, there was like, I could tell it wasn't just some like, oh, let's, you know, hang out type song. There was some depth to the lyrics. So could you talk a little bit about what that song is about?
Okay. In South Africa, we are facing a heavy situation in terms of how many women get killed every year. There's a very, very high rate of abuse and violence against women. It's really, really very strong. It's not like, it's an everyday, very, very horrific stories that you would hear. And, you know, we just got into a place where it's just a normal part of life when you hear that a woman got killed because her boyfriend did this or her husband did that, or, you know, so the song was literally in retaliation or maybe speaking out about that. It just got a super, super, super heavy, you know. Yeah. You know, when something gets to a point where you're numb to it, where it becomes everyday news. That's what violence against women have become in South Africa. And that song was literally to stand and speak about that. And in the song, I say to women, you need to learn and arm up. You need to learn how to protect yourself in a very practical way. And I'm not talking about little groups where you can meet and talk to other women about the fact that you've been hit or you've been abused. I'm talking about learning how to use a gun, how to use a weapon to protect yourself, learn how to defend yourself. And I know this at this time, this is not the thing to be preaching. It's a very sensitive time in the world, but it's a very crucial time in South Africa, in that it is a war against women. And there is no way to win this war if you cannot protect yourself physically. You know, there's so many platforms to help you protect, you know, all these platforms are there, but they're not in your home when that breaks down. They're not there. You know, your group is not there at home.
Yeah.
That when that shit breaks down, you know, and this is to say, women need to find a way to fight this. And it's also a call to the men to just alert them that if she puts poison in your food because she cooks your meal every night, you will die. You're not untouchable.
Yeah.
The fact that you keep hitting her doesn't mean that that's all there is to it. She's letting you live.
Yeah. Yeah.
Allow her to live right now because she cooks for you every day. You demand that plate.
Yeah.
And you get it.
That's actually something, in terms of looking at it the way, because you're coming home demanding these things. This is the person who literally takes care of you. I mean, not only feeds you, but when you're sick, all of these things that women do in the home. And so your life is in that person's hands in so many different ways. It's interesting because I remember the total shutdown march that you all had like simultaneously in different cities. And it seems like I don't want to say specifically, I remember there were a few cases that really kind of, I mean, there have been several, but there were a few cases that really kind of got that march, really kind of fueled it. So I remember there was one case of a young girl who went to a post office and she was raped and killed. So do you think like that, movements like the total shutdown, because there was a lot of anger, there was a lot of frustration, there was a lot of, and I know a lot of the movement leaders have been doing things like, you know, the courts will protect the name of the accused, but they've been like outing the name of the accused, showing up at trials. Do you think that the history South Africa has in terms of protesting, in terms of kind of standing up to these things, will ultimately help in this particular case in terms of the violence against women?
You know, one of the things that, you know, about South Africa is that it has a very violent way of engaging. And it's a pity because then it means that women have to be violent in order for them to engage and be heard in this situation. And this is not the best outcome. The best outcome is women to be heard just as is without being violent, but we have to take it there. And yes, when we do take it there, then some things start happening, you know, notes start being taken, people start sitting up in their seats and, you know, pushing their ties up and coming to address people, you know, but it's not enough, you know. We have a history of very violent, whenever we strike, it's a very violent strike. And I mean, it might not be a violence against people, it might be violence against property, it might be, you know, we are that people, you know, and it's not something that I own, but it's something that I understand about our people, you know, and it's also tied into the history of the nation in that we were never heard when we were speaking, so we had to be violent. Peaceful protests never really worked in this country. And, you know, our democracy is like maybe 20, 25 years, not more old. So it's very young, the expression part of the country, you know. So I wouldn't like it to get there, but it does get there. And when it does get there, something does kind of seem to happen, you know. Shift does kind of tend to happen. But I do feel like more needs to happen because it hasn't stopped. Just because the news have moved on to something else doesn't mean that, you know, this has stopped. You know, it's still going on. Yeah. Like it's still going on in heavy numbers. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I saw, because I remember once the march happened and they apparently were able to talk to the president and like issue a list of demands. And then it was like time ran out. There were like deadlines and deadlines came and went. And like there weren't these changes that were implemented. And so, it's definitely like you were saying, the numbers in South Africa are really, really high. And I know from the outside, it's, you know, you kind of see South Africa as this nation of like fighters, like literally a nation of fighters. Like anything, like the teachers, you know, aren't treated right, they strike. The miners, they strike. So you see this as a nation of people who have no problem standing up, versus when you look at some of the other countries where, like, you know, even right now in Tanzania, we're facing our own crisis and people are being silenced. There isn't that tradition. So to try to even tell Tanzanians, oh, let's do a march, you would not be successful. No one would show up. So it's like, how does this specific issue kind of, how is it like been able to, I don't want to say stay around, but kind of hang on through this? Like, you know what I'm saying? Because you would expect this to be something that would be able to be addressed and kind of, but it seems to be stubbornly, this issue with domestic violence, this issue of sexual assault, all of these things seem to kind of be hanging on, and they're not necessarily being the resolve or the resolutions that need to happen.
I mean, I think everything starts with the source, right? At the source of it all. Where did it all start? You know, and we have a very, you know, crazy history that is the source of all these things. And I know everybody's going to be like, we can't always lean on, you know, the history, the apartheid, and be like, this is the cause. But it literally is, you know, you back people against a hectic wall and then you expect them to survive, you know, and, you know, you don't know what that survival actually means. So our society is actually quite sick in the head. Our society is warped in the head. And it's very hard to kind of change the way that people think if they are still in the same place.
Yeah.
Because it's nice to sell the idea of democracy and the idea of freedom and, you know, the idea of all these things, but the actual, in the practical, you know, in the ground, those things don't live. They're not there, you know. And so it's like, it's a very hard situation to get out of. I don't have any answers for this. All I know is that I know that the ladies need to find a way to protect themselves.
Yeah.
You know, but I don't have any answers of how to get out of it, because the source is so deep that we need psychologists, we need you know, all those people to work through the people, to work with the people. And you know, things like psychology, those are expensive things. You know, these are things we can't even attain. You know, if you want to talk to, you know, they say that hurt people hurt people. And you know, to get to the person who hurt first, you don't even know how to engage with them. You know, how many people want to go back and engage with the person who abused them and find out and be empathetic and sympathize with them? You know, we just want them in jail. Go to jail, and then what happens when you get to jail? It's not like they're gonna get there and help you. You know, then I don't have any answers for this. All I know is that, like, the women are in trouble, because you know that when a man is feeling down, their psyche, they've broken down, they need to break down the next thing that's next to them. And who's there?
That's and I know, again, you know, in terms of the music, you've dealt with a lot of different issues, a lot of different social issues in your music. And I remember asking you, I think one of the first times we talked about feminism, and you kind of, now I'm kind of understanding kind of your views in terms of kind of looking at these isms like the feminism and all of these things, because of, you know, it's so far removed perhaps from like what's happening every single day in people's homes. And I think that that's been, in talking to artists, you know, specifically women, it has been that kind of disconnect between sometimes activists, but definitely academics who are kind of like sitting here kind of talking about these things, oh, we need to do this and that, but that doesn't necessarily help the woman who has to go home from work and deal with, you know, the BS when she gets home. But one of the other things in terms of language, and I know I've asked you this before, but obviously you're perfectly fluent in English. And I know that your decision to not rap in English was very intentional. Can you speak to kind of what led to that decision? Especially when you see some artists that are even not that great in English, but decide that they're going to rap in English because they want this international, what have you, but you've managed to, you know, be successful and do your thing rapping in the language other than English. So yes. Okay. Xhosa. Okay. So what was the thinking that made you kind of make that decision to do that, to rap in Xhosa?
You know, we've learned that one of the elements of hip hop is knowledge of self, right? And that's a big part of it. You know, you can do whatever. You can be great with the scripts. You can be great with everything. You can be great with the art, you can whatever. But if you don't know what your voice or what you say, you don't know yourself. You know, you might face a lot of stumbling blocks. You know, because you're going to be moving with whoever's moving. Like you can't be in yourself. You know, and so that became a big part of it. And for me, the language that I speak, this is like our source of history. This is our source of communication, identification. There's so much in the language that I felt like I can only express myself better in my own language. I can express my stories better. I can touch my better, the people who live the kind of stories that I tell better. And it's okay, because when I first heard English, I don't know what they were saying, but I vibed with it. So I understood that music on its own was a language. So that was already taken care of, you know. So it just made sense for me to rap in Xhosa. And it didn't take too much. It was like, okay, cool. So you're going to be doing this. You're representing yourself. What's the best way? Do it in your own language. Boom. You know. Yeah.
Now, I know that the film Black Panther, they spoke Xhosa in the film. Yeah. So did that like have any impact on the popularity of the language? Like what were your thoughts when you, because I'm assuming you saw the film, what were your thoughts when you heard it in the film?
I mean, I think it's beautiful that other people are also getting to learn the language and know the language. I mean, I think it's beautiful. That's how the culture grows, you know. I mean, we speak American language, culture, and we're not even in America, you understand? And so it's only beautiful when a culture gets to grow and other people get to take a part of it and identify with a part of it, you know. It can only be good. Yeah. You know. So I thought it was beautiful. I saw them trying to speak close up. Bring their best. Get that best.
Yeah, no, when I heard, I was like, ooh, they went, I mean, like that was a difficult language to choose. Usually, like I'm so used to seeing like Swahili spoken in so many movies, like Swahili is just kind of often seen as this like African language. And that, you know, and so sometimes I'm like, you hear it and you're just like, the accents are, you know, but so I was like, I'm wondering what she thought about the, because I know the actor who played, I think the father or something, is actually Xhosa, but no one else was. So
he's a legend here. Yeah, big man. Big man. So I listen, like I said, I find it beautiful that other people are learning the language and are starting to engage with it in whichever way that it's introduced to them. There's nothing wrong with that. I think that's fantastic. You know, there's so much that we always think that, oh, African languages are dying and African cultures are dying. And then as soon as other people start latching onto it, we find a problem with it. But I feel like, you know, you first have to crawl before you walk. No one can start fluent. It's impossible. Yeah. Well, I didn't start fluent with English. I had to first, you know, say the words in the way, whatever. You know.
Yeah, I always tell folks that people are surprised when I first came to the US, I didn't speak any English. So it was, you know, I came as a kid. So, you know, you learn this, and of course, you know, because I went through kind of those teen years here, my accent, just everything switched over. But yeah, it's baby steps.
But you can't shun a people for starting a new language. If you had to learn Japanese today, you won't start fluent. Yeah. You know, you have to get into it, and it takes years. You know, it took years for me to practice English. I had to go to English schools for a long time for me to learn how to speak English, because it's not my home language. Yeah. You know, so I think it's only beautiful that the language spreads, because the culture spreads like that too. You know.
Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna give students, I know some folks may have questions, because I could sit and talk and forget that. So this, are there any, Anastasia, did you get any notices of questions or people who wanted to ask questions? I know if they're in the class, then they can, you know, kind of raise their hand and unmute themselves. But I know for the folks on Facebook, they have to.
Yeah, I haven't gotten any questions yet. So if people have questions, please send them in. And I actually have a question myself, you know, listening to the situation that many families, women find themselves in, and the huge toll of generational trauma on mental health and the stability of the democracy. How do you see music as healing generational trauma, either in your own language or in the broader South African scene? And do you have any insights on how to address the role of generational trauma, both in people's everyday lives and also in the durability of South Africa's democracy going forward?
Okay, I'll start with the first question, which is how do I see the music playing its part in this situation? For me, I believe that music and the arts in general are there to record the history. We have to record how people are thinking, feeling, perspectives that they are seeing things in that time, as musicians, as artists, as painters, as, you know, or any artist of any kind, you know. And this is important because you have to reflect the society as it is. Because once people see something that they can relate to, they can then move forward from that point. So I do feel that music, it's not that we have to bring the answers as musicians, we just need to reflect the times, you know, because once people see that, it's like a mirror. And once you see what's going on your face in the mirror or on your body in the mirror, then you can fix, then you can start to maneuver and move it how you want it, you know. And so I feel that art is very important, specifically for that. In terms of healing, that in itself is healing because that's cathartic. If somebody says something that you feel and you engage and relate with, that helps you too, you know. You can view yourself in it, you know. In that way, that works. In terms of how to help generational trauma, oh my gosh, it's a very heavy, deep thing. But I do believe that the family is where everything starts. Because I do believe that every personality that you will ever meet in the world, you will first meet within your family members. Everything, every gripe, every person that says yes and every person that says no, you will meet them within your family. And if we can learn how to restructure our families, more especially here in Africa, because they were deliberately put apart. You know, in South Africa, men were taken to the mines, women were the domestics. It was a very deliberate separating of the families, you know. And I do believe that that's the core of everything, you know. We are a community-based people, Africans. And so once you start making people think as individuals, you mess up the whole community, you know. And that's family. Community becomes family in its own. But it starts with a nuclear family, like this
right.
Family, you know. And I do believe that that's where a lot of our problems stem from, you know.
The core narrative.
Love. Yes. It's like it's hard to find love outside if you haven't found it in your family. But it's not impossible. But it can
right.
be possible.
And it may be, you know, a musician who comes into the heart or a book that comes through the door in a terrible situation. Mm-hmm. And that just opens up the person to that greater plane of awareness. And if that happens enough time, the country itself can open to a greater plane of awareness. Mm-hmm. And I think we're seeing the need for that in America as well. And it's just really refreshing to hear your perspective on that, you know, in your own country, because there's a lot of wisdom for our local audience here in the States in it.
Yeah. I mean, listen, our people have been broken up in many different pieces. And it's hard to find love just in general, you know. And I honestly believe that because our families have been broken up so much, right now we're talking about things, for instance, when we talk about, and I know this is a little stretch, but when we talk about things like feminism, we don't always include men in that topic. It's really just about the women. However, women don't live in an isolated society. We do live with men. And we need men to also be understanding and be part of this in order for us to move it forward. But those are the kind of things that I say when I say the family structures, when we've now taken apart that part that we actually need men. We're like, no, we don't need you, but we do, you know. And it's hard even to own up to it. It's hard to even say it, right? As women, we got to a point now where we're like, I'm not even going to say I need a man, you know. We've gotten to
right.
a point, and it's very sad because we were both for each other.
Right. And patriarchy hurts men as well as women.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really does. And this is the thing, like there's such an imbalance, and the imbalance honestly starts with the family. You know, if there's then if you learn the family at home, the balance at home, you can learn it outside, you can move with it outside, you know. But if you don't have it at all, then you know.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And what you were saying, Sia, you know, we've had a lot of conversations about how I feel about feminism and isms in general, you know. And I have a big problem with isms because sometimes they take away from what is, in my view, and they isolate to one thing. And as much as I understand it and I know the need for it, I don't always feel like I have to be part of it in the same way, you know. And I'm saying this because I was raised in a matriarchy. I was raised with my mother, grandmother, and, you know, women in my family were very strong and they were, you know, in front of everything. But we never as feminism, even the men in the family, we just saw that as the family. And we go out of that and then you get into Europe. I went to Europe and I was asked, how does it feel to be a feminist in Africa? I was like, what is that feminist? That's the word. What is that? You know, and they have to answer that. It's like, yeah, is that what it is? You know, I don't know, you know. And then it's also uncomfortable fitting into that because some of the things that I'd say and feel, because I don't feel like I don't need men in my life, you know. I'm very thankful for my uncles who were there when my father was not there, you know. I'm very thankful for my brothers, you know, and it's very hard for me to be like, I don't need them in my life because I can see a position for them in my life, you know. And that's why I'm saying some things isms and schisms, I can be very hard to understand. There is no closer word for them, some of these words, you know. But not that I don't understand why they're there. It's just that I don't always feel like I have to immerse myself in them or identify by them, you know. But yes, like I said, the bottom answer is that our families need to be restructured.
And I know we have one person who raised their hand. I want to get to them, but it just what you were saying in terms of needing men. I know that looking at kind of from an African feminist perspective, that within kind of the academia, that's been one of our struggles is kind of as African women kind of like tied to our culture, to our ethnic identities, which are based on family. And, you know, so we can't say that there's this battle of the sexes because no, that goes counter to, you know, so when you kind of look at kind of this, the need African women in the academy have had to kind of distinguish themselves by saying, no, this is African feminism. And it's different than, you know, what you may see in Europe or even, you know, in the United States, and kind of having that, you know, even here, Latina women, you know, they've got, you know, kind of feminism that is more in line with their culture, that is not, you know, so yeah. And so but I could talk for a while. So let me, Sada, you can unmute yourself and ask a question. Saying her name right.
I want to say something.
Sada.
Oh, hello.
Okay.
Hello, my name's Sayada, and so you were talking about music and art reflecting the times and not necessarily being responsible in your healing, but helping people get to that place of healing. So I just wanted to ask you, like, what is a time in your life where art or music helped you in your own journey of healing, where that realization came?
For me, I think it's always been a part of my life and my healing, you know. Okay, I can remember a specific time in high school, and I was going through a lot of difficulties in high school. I went to a very, very expensive, very posh high school, and I was living in a township. So it was always, you know, like two lifestyles that you had to split yourself. And this is, you know, kids here experience that, where you have to, you know, be two people. You know, you're one person when you're at the posh school and you're another person when you are in the ghetto. And I needed a way to break out of it. And because I was so caught in between the two, you know, it was easy for me to take the street life into the school. And that was obviously not welcome. You can't do that, you know. And I was expelled from the school. You know, I took it really, really far, and I got expelled. And at that time, I felt like no one could understand what I was going through. You know, I didn't have any friends nearby who also went to a posh school and were feeling this kind of thing, you know. And, you know, for me, music, hip hop, art really became the crutch where I could really explain how I, you know, I could, you know, these people were saying it in a tone, and they were saying the words that I could understand and feel, and, you know, in a passionate way that I could get. And I survived on it. I cannot lie, I honestly survived on it. And because I was also in a township, there were so many other things that were open to me outside of academics. And I could have easily gone with them, you know, and, you know, that world is very close, you know, and I was very close to that world too. But at the same time, because I had this music that was separated from everyone and everything else, I really wanted it and immersed myself in it. At the same time, I wanted to be there with the people, but I also wanted to get as much as I can from this music. And I learned a lot from hip hop specifically for me. I've learned a lot from hip hop, and it opened my world. And it was much more of an enticing world than the other one. So I chose it. So there are so many moments in my life that I can point to and say, you know, at that time I could have gone there, but instead I went to the hip hop show, or I went to listen to that tape that I got, you know, today, or and that helped me because I could have been there instead, you know. So it became a crutch throughout my teenage years, like an everyday crutch, you know, like it's the thing that I would go home for, to close myself at home and listen to the tapes instead of being outside with my friends, going and doing some shit, you know. And when I come back from doing shit sometimes, that's what I come back to at the same time, you know. So it really, for me, it saved my life because there were other people who were going through the same things that I was going through in other parts of the world even. Can you imagine? That's really crazy, you know. So, yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Other raise your hand. You have, I'm trying to see if there's anyone else raising their hand. Okay, I had the question in terms of language in hip hop in South Africa in general. So would you say that, okay, so I know English, a lot of artists rap in English, but other than English in terms of South African languages, which ones would you say are most often used in hip hop? And I know that they've got these different kind of subgenres that often are based on language, but would you say that there's, you know, one or two languages that are more commonly heard in hip hop in South Africa?
Outside of English and South African languages?
Mm-hmm. Well, outside of English. So what South African languages?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Zulu, Sotho, Tswana, hip hop, Xhosa hip hop, Afrikaans. I'm hearing some things from the Bob nowadays, you know, so yeah, cool. I mean, we have 9 official languages, 10 with signing. So yeah, we do hear a lot of different languages.
Is it that because I know Johannesburg and Cape Town definitely kind of have their distinct hip hop scenes. I know Pretoria, you know, there's hip hop there, and so I know there. But would you say that there are a lot of differences regionally depending on where you go in South Africa in terms of how hip hop culture looks?
Yeah, most definitely. Because I mean, all the different provinces have their own different languages and cultures. So the hip hop culture will also follow that. You know, you'll have the English, yes, of course, but then you'll also have the language of that space. You know, So in Johannesburg is, I guess, the most mixed of all the provinces in South Africa, you know. So you have a diversity of languages in Johannesburg. But when you come to Cape Town, you'll have English, you'll have Afrikaans, and you'll have Xhosa, for instance, you know. And, you know, in Durban or KZN, you'll have more Zulu rappers, Zulu and English rappers, you know. So it moves from place to place, but in Johannesburg, I think that's the melting pot kind of for everybody, for all the languages.
And that's where like a lot of the industry, like the labels, and like I hear a lot of, that's where folks go when they kind of want to get into the commercial. Okay.
Yes. I mean, for a long time, Joburg is a city of gold. You know, this is the money city. So a lot of artists, a lot of creatives, a lot of business people, if they want to really make it and make it big, you know, they go up to Joburg. It's for a long time in history. But because the world has changed and people can, you know, the internet has also opened up the world a little bit. People can kind of stay in their own spaces. It's the dynamic is changing, you know. Nowadays, one does not have to, you know, automatically go to Joburg to make it, you know. Nowadays, you can be in your own city, in your own place, in your own area, and still be able to reach the world, you know. So things are changing slowly, but, you know, slowly.
Yeah. Lauren, I see your hand.
Yes, hi, my name is Lauren. I'm a student at Howard. And earlier I heard you say that music can of course be like a reflection of reality and a tool for healing. So I wonder, what role, if any, do you think music has in politics or like shaping social consciousness?
Okay, I mean, I do believe it is the exact same role, you know. I mean, in politics, you reflect your own politics, the things that matter to you, the things that you follow, and the things that you believe in. You reflect that in the time that you were living, because you can't reflect that from another time. It's in the time that you're living. So the things that you see, you foresee, the likes, the dislikes, you know, those are the things that you can reflect in your own music. And for instance, in South Africa, we've had a long history of musicians who are very political. In the, like Miriam Makeba was quite political, so much so that she was banned from the country until, you know, the ban was lifted, and etc. Mandela became president. So it is important. And what she was doing was literally reflecting the time. She was telling the story of South Africa to the rest of the world, you know. It is important. And I think that it's something that our generation, or not our generation, or maybe the generation now is kind of losing sight of, that it's also one of the things we need to reflect on, just as much as we need to reflect on everything else, you know. This is also something, the politics of the time is something that we also need to be looking at and reflecting and singing and talking about, because it's not always going to be like this. In 20, 50 years time, they'll be saying something different, or maybe the same thing, you know. When Marvin Gaye said, "What's going on?" It's like your song you can play today. It's like, what is going on? You understand? So I still believe that it is essential that artists pay attention to every part of the society, because we are supposed to be reflecting exactly that. You know, sometimes I hear it, like when people listen to some music, let's say music that they don't necessarily like, let's say party music, you know, or, you know, when people get, you know, do the drugs, the gum sound came from ecstasy, you know. So that is a time, it's a reflection of that time. And the musicians are supposed to be reflecting that, whether you like it or not. It's the mirror. What you see in the mirror is what it is, you know. And it's important in the good and the bad of it, you know. Do I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
All right, if anybody has one or two other questions. Okay. So one of the things in just putting together this series on, where we got different artists, it was one, most of the artists that are coming are women, which, I realize there's that bias there. So there's, we had Gigi first, and then Yugen is coming next week. We also had last week an artist from Kenya named Sugar, and then the last artist is Sampa the Great. And so it's like all these like really hard. I'm like, okay, you get your like wish list of artists, and you're like, so to be able to kind of all of you to have been able to come through. And one of the things that Gigi was saying, because I was asking her about the women in hip hop in South Africa and how diverse you are, just looking at you, Yugen and Gigi, like stylistically very different artists, very strong lyricist, but different styles. And so and one of the things I was asking her is how much the industry tries to questioning how much the industry tries to pit women against each other. And so she was kind of saying that it's there, but that she felt that the women like don't buy into that a lot, that women don't feed into it, that there's more cooperation amongst women than there is this kind of backbiting.
Yeah. And I believe that to be true. I think for a long time when I was coming up, there was those times when the guys would try to, the industry would try to pit, the girls against each other. But then we met and it was like, like what?
Yeah.
And you don't have to buy into it though. This whole idea that there has to be one queen and like 25 kings is why? Why? We don't have to buy into all of that. And it really works against everything. It works against the industry. It works against creativity. It works against progress. We don't have to engage the way that we are told to engage. We can make our own rules, And she's correct in saying that, we haven't really, the ladies haven't really like fallen into that pit at all. More than anything, it's like I feel like the ladies really like each other and they really want to big each other up and build and do that, and I'm down with that. I mean, shit, this country needs it. This country is, we need to have more women in the game and more women being seen and heard, and all these styles, all the different styles need to be acknowledged, unless we start thinking that we are all one person, because this whole idea that there's only one type of woman needs to be, shattered. So,
and I love the fact that you're all also, different representations of African women. So it's not only just like one woman, but like that, so I think sometimes when you listen to songs produced by male artists, and, it's great that they do, kind of songs and dedication to women, but it seems like they describe the same type of woman in each song, the woman at least that they hold up and revere. It's like, the same, oh, she's so strong, she's doing this, morally, she's, great. But then the other side is, if you're not that, then, oh, you're a hoe and all these. So it's like there are these, but then when you look at the women, you're like, there are all of these different flavors and sounds. And so, yeah, I think that you guys kind of having this diverse representation, because I've said many times that South Africa, as far as Africa is concerned, has more women active in hip hop than any other country. And it's beautiful because you get to hear all, I mean, even like a couple months ago, we also interviewed Dope St. Jude, and it's just like all of these just wonderful voices. And it's, so getting a chance to actually, when I went to South Africa and I got a chance to meet you and I got a chance to meet Yugen, and it was just kind of like you end up having a conversation, and it's just like, you forget that you just met this person like an hour ago. And next thing you know, like I always tell people how I got lost coming to see you for the first time. But when I got there, it was like all good. And then you came to New York, and, we kind of, hung out, ended up at some spot in Harlem, and just, you know, from that, because again, you've got women who are themselves, who are not feeling like I have to be this, you know, whatever mold. And I think South African women, just in terms of them being who they are, it's like, this is me.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes.
So
I mean, it's a beautiful thing, that, you know, and I think it's also a thing that we've also learned from seeing the diversity of other women from other places, you know. And I know that, for instance, I grew up with a lot of American, listening to a lot of American hip hop. And the time that I did grow up, you know, there were different women on the scene, you know, MC Light was there, Queen Latifah was there, you know, the Lawrence, and the Kims and the Foxies were there. I remember Smooth. My gosh, like there was like Salt and Pepper. There was there were so many. It was so diverse that you didn't have to choose. You know, you could just be with it all. And because our industry is so young and we grew up watching so many other women from other spots, it didn't necessarily mean that we have to be in competition for us. You understand? Because we didn't have the same experience. You know. So it's still growing for us. It's still, hip hop is very young, and we are in a position where we can pioneer our sounds. That's how young it is. You know, I can say that I can be a pioneer. You know, one day kids will look at me, can you pioneer that? It's great, you know, but I'm just saying that's how young our industry is versus the American hip hop industry. You understand? So we have a slightly different look at it, you know, slightly different perspective. You know, but I also think that, you know, some of the things that the guys have done, we can't look at them in a bad way. You know, we have to look at it in a good way. What the guys have done is that they put each other on. That's it. And we can't shun them from doing that. We just have to do that. That is it. You know, they've defined who they are and what their playing field is, you know, and what defines that, you know. That's what we do for ourselves. We don't have to wait for the guys to do that for us. Yeah. You know, we do that ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. I definitely have enjoyed, you know, like just getting, you know, our friendship and kind of being able to connect with you. And like I said, you again, Black Rock. And I think that sometimes I'll meet women and artists, and there have been a couple times where I've done interviews for the podcast and I really just didn't release them because the words that were coming out of the person's, it was just kind of like, oh, you know, well, you know, talk about why you do what you do. And it's just kind of like this unawareness. And it's just kind of like, well, this is what I was told was cool. So this is what I'm doing. And this is the thing to do. And it's just like, okay, you know, so you get kind of deflated because you're just like, okay, you're hoping that there's going to be this strong kind of voice. It's like, and it's, again, you know, regardless of what it is, your style is if it's authentically you, then I think that that's the best that we can ask for. But then when you hear an artist just kind of say that they're doing something because they were told that this is what they're, you know, is popular and this is what will get, it just becomes just kind of, but it's, you know, it's a reality that's
it is. I mean, it's part of the reality. Some artists are part of the machine and they have to explain what it feels like to be part of that mission. You know? And what can you do? I mean, it's a part of the life that we live, you know. And they are partly a reflection of that life, you know. And I understand that maybe you are feeling embarrassed on their behalf. Behalf of feeling quite humiliated. Yeah, no, I understand you are feeling embarrassed on behalf of them, you know, but sometimes it is what it is, you know.
We have another question here.
Oh, you do? Okay.
So it is, what is the role of politics in your music? And in what way does South African politics motivate you or inspire you, if it does in any way? I think this is from our Facebook audience.
Okay. Ooh, okay. I mean, it plays a huge role, whether it's social politics or, you know, it's government politics or, you know, I think politics in general, they play a huge, especially in South Africa. It's a very politically aware society, you know. Things are quite tense here all the time. And so politics play a huge role. And I know a lot of artists try to stay away from it because of how intense the politics of the country are. They can open doors or close doors for you. So they do play a part in your consciousness, just in general, how you think about what you're going to say. They definitely play a part in that. And the kind of music that I do, in that I like to talk about what the people are talking about. I like to immerse myself in the feelings, the collective consciousness, so to speak. And sometimes those politics are not favorable to what the government is doing. Sometimes they're not favorable to, you know, regular society, or sometimes they're not favorable to, you know, male-female politics, you know, but it doesn't, I have to think about it. I'm always aware of it. It's hard to separate myself from it. I did a freestyle not so long ago, maybe last year, that was literally about the politics of the country, and not just the country, but the continent itself, in that I feel like, you know, a lot of people are feeling like the continent is going to other people and it's not really serving the Africans themselves. And I always feel like as Africans, we have to take that power back ourselves. We can't let somebody else give us that power. I mean, there's no way. We can't play with somebody else's rules in order for us to be comfortable at home. We have to play with our rules. So you have to, you can't, it's hard to separate yourself from the politics of the country if you are the kind of artist that I am, who is trying to reflect what is happening more, especially with the collective consciousness. You know, I'm very much that kind of artist that is aware of what my people are thinking and feeling and what they would like to express, and you know, what is not really being seen but is happening. So it's a big, major part. Does that
and providing, right. And that mirror, you know, that power of reflection, you know, is a really big deal for your audience.
Yes, I mean, you do music that, I do music that I feel like I would like to reflect back on it and understand. I want to understand where I was, what I was thinking, how I was feeling, and I want somebody else to also understand that. So because I am so aware of the things that are happening around me, not because I'm special, but because I'm born in this place where we are kind of forced to be aware of those kind of things, then it's hard to separate yourself. It's hard to separate yourself.
So we've got one last question. It's going to be the last one. Winnie, you can unmute.
Hi, thank you. I'm so glad you mentioned that your music focuses a lot on the social situation in South Africa. And you know, Pan-Africanism in South Africa is something I've always been interested in, because I wondered how it would exactly manifest itself, especially because out of most African countries, I would say all but South Sudan, you guys got independence. Well, I guess you call it independence later on, very late in the 1990s. So how does that really manifest, and how do you do it in a way that's not really divisive, but still celebrating, you know, that African culture and African nature?
Yeah. Ooh. You know, like, as you say, you know, it's not exactly independence that we got as South Africans. What we got was Freedom Day. This is completely different from independence. I don't know if you catch my vibe here, you know. It's a day we got a Freedom Day. We didn't get independence. We're still quite a dependent country. You know, monies come from elsewhere. We depend a lot on what others can help us with. So it's a really tough situation in that, you know, we have this Freedom Day, but at the same time, people are not free. So it's like a mind fuck of sorts. It's very tough to navigate. It's like a new way of navigating every time. I don't know how to answer your question, to be honest, because it's still like treacherous waters, you know. We're not, it's like 20 years democracy in the whole, when we look at ourselves, looking at the rest of the continent, we're really quite young. And, you know, a young person, you know, when you think about a young person, if you were in your 30s, 40s, and you look at a young person, I'm talking about, you know, teenager, you look at how they act out, you know, and that's South Africa, you know, and the rest of the continent is like an adult, but this is the last born, and the last born can be spoiled a little bit more, but they don't know how to act, you know, those kind of situations, you know. So, you know, we've had a lot of xenophobic type of situations attached with South Africa. And this goes against the whole Pan-African identity, Pan-African thoughts. Those are things that South Africans are working on, but it can be hard. Media is not always working with us when it comes to that. And it literally is because of the hand-to-mouth situation that South Africans are very poor. It's a hand-to-mouth situations with our people. Our people are very afraid to get out of their spaces, out of their comfort zones, to meet new people. It's a 25-year-old less than democracy. So we're not really accustomed to engaging, you know, and it's just, it's a little tough. It's a little, it's treacherous, like I said, because people are not, they are surviving. People are not living, you know, they're kind of surviving. So it's still a fight for the stomach. And so I can't answer your question, Mama. I hope you understand.
Of course, thank you. I think also, like, I really, because even doing research on it, it's a very hard topic, especially in South Africa, to a lot of people don't speak out on it. And so that's something I always wondered how it even manifests itself. In Southern Africa in general, I think it's definitely different.
It is, can't lie. And I mean, the best way I could say is you have to come here and experience it and feel it, because it's so complex and it's you hit with so many things at the same time. And see, I'm sure you understand what I
still haven't figured out. Every time I go to South Africa, it's still, I'm just like, there's still a lot of layers there that I'm navigating, and I always learn something new about the South, because I do think South Africa is unique in so many different ways. And so, yeah, there's a lot there.
It's definitely a special place. It's young and it's got a lot to learn and it's got room for growth, you know. So I personally, I believe that every person from another part of Africa who comes into South Africa is a plus, because they teach this country a little bit more and push it a little bit further. And I would like to see more people come through, you know. But we have a way to go. We have a way to go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we're gonna end there, because I know, what time is it there? Like 1:30 now? 1:30 in the morning?
Yeah.
No, not 1:30. What?
Yeah.
Yeah, 1:30.
Yeah.
Okay. But I know it's just like, I couldn't hang with you last time we went to Cape Town. I was like, we hung out that day at the beach, and then you guys wanted to do. I was like, oh, I didn't even know how to tell you that. I was just like, I can't hang out. I can't go out. But it was like there was so much energy, and I really wanted to, but
summertime, see ya. It was a summertime. In summer here we do things. Don't sleep in summer. Don't do that.
I know. But we're gonna have to celebrate like post-COVID pandemic. Hopefully, you know, yeah. Either you come here or when I come there, we'll have to do something.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. All right. So we definitely are gonna have like the links to your social media stuff, your music, you know, so folks can find you online. And thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys for having me. I'm so sorry I came a little after the time, but thank you. Thank you guys for having me.
This has been wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anastasia.
Fully vangeli basen fuman futela kufuthi babeli khali lixilongo ngoko sopa ulivanga nto nje kungamameli salibela ukhonse sasemhlabeni imnqandeni